Fear Factor, 15 minutes to your ideal retirement. Hello, this is Adrienne Berg, and I'm here with financial advisor Ronald Gilak, who's going to answer your questions in a 12-part webinar series and make sure that you have the retirement lifestyle that you love and deserve. Now, this is the fourth in our webinar series, and all of the previous three are accessible to you on the website ronaldgilak.com. That's G-E-L-O-K. And what we've decided to do here is give you introductions so that you can actually do some work for yourself and then come in and have a complimentary consultation on creating that retirement lifestyle that's perfect for you. In our first webinar, we gave you an introduction about the fear factor and how fear helps us do the wrong thing. Sounds funny, but we think it's helping us when we're afraid. But in fact, we're doing the wrong thing because of it. And in the first webinar, you'll get out of some of those habits that promote the fear factor in your life. In the second webinar, we raised your consciousness about retirement and taxes. Many people feel that because they're not going to have a lot of income, they don't have to worry about taxes. Not so. You can put up to a third more buying power in your financial future if you do concentrate on taxes. In the third webinar, we talked about the difference between a plan and a system. And Ronald told us how often people come to his office with 100-page financial plans for their retirement, none of which are really effective because they have no real system for their wealth accumulation, wealth protection, and wealth distribution. And now in this webinar, we're going to ask, why is tax-free so much better than tax-deferred? Ron, welcome again.
Thank you, Adrienne. Pleasure to be here.
Well, you know, let's start with the difference between tax-free and tax-deferred. We may think we know what that means, but particularly tax-deferred, we may not realize what that does to us when we simply defer and not pay taxes earlier.
Well, Adrienne, I think we're all a little bit brainwashed to think that tax deferral is the end-all, be-all, and a cure to all our ills. We're all told that we should sock away as much money as we possibly can in employer-sponsored plans because the money is growing free from current taxes. And that has a certain appeal to think that we can grow our money free from current taxes. And then the premise, which is really for a lot of people a false premise, is that when we get into retirement, we'll be in a much lower tax bracket when we go to take the money out. And as we discussed in an earlier webinar, when you're entering retirement, you typically don't have deductions for mortgage interest any longer. You typically don't have deductions for dependent children anymore. And tax rates are not going lower in our society. So too much tax deferral can actually be like a pact with the devil because we're trading not paying current taxes during accumulation years for some unknown future tax rate which could be much higher than we anticipated. That's why my view is that tax-free is so much better because the premise behind tax-free is let's accumulate free from current tax and let's have money come out tax-free. And we're not just talking about the tax-free Roth IRA. We're talking about other systems than just the Roth, because the Roth is not right for everybody.
Now, before we deeply go into the Roth and the other systems, let's talk about required minimum distributions. You know, very frequently people are retired or they're semi-retired, and they reach a certain age, and they are forced to take distributions, and they really haven't planned for the taxation at that point. Explain the RMD.
Well, when you have an employer-sponsored plan, a qualified plan, a 401k, a 403b, a 457 plan, a lot of these plans start with the number 4. They're all in the 400 section of the IRS code. There is a requirement that says when you, well, it's actually by the April 1st, following the year in which you turn 70 and a half, you have to start taking forced distributions. These are typically called required minimum distributions. Some people call them minimum required distributions, all talking about the same thing. Now at 70 and a half, that required minimum distribution is only 3.65% of the prior December 31st value of the account. But as you go through your 70s, the percentage that you're forced to take out is increasing. So for example, at 72, it's approximately 4.2%. As you're in your 80s, it can be 6%. So as you get older, you're forced to take out more money at unknown future tax rates.
And what's interesting is that as we do increase our longevity, we're very likely to be around to make those distributions to ourselves, and we're paying taxes generally at a time that we really don't have the income for it. With the new boomer and the idea that 60 is the new 30, I don't know, I think it's just the new 60, but it is new. We may be working. We may even be working till age 72, 3, 4, or 5, because we want to and we like to and the money is good. But we do stop eventually. And it's interesting that the cards are really stacked against us. The moment we stop working, usually maximum in our mid-70s, as you're explaining to us now, the distribution requirements go up. We have to pay taxes just at a time when we have gotten rid of our income. So if we prepaid those taxes, if we were living tax-free by then, we probably would be much better off. But how do we determine when a client comes to you, how do you help them determine when they need to move from a tax-deferred type of investing to a tax-free investing?
Well, I think this is why it's so important to work with advisors who have a skill set that includes knowledge of the tax codes and at the same time how different financial products work in relation to the tax code. So what we like to do is look at what we call tax-free alternative planning, where we might compare the road of just staying in the traditional IRA and taking income distributions from the IRA and paying income taxes each year and seeing how long the money will last based on an assumed rate of return. So we look at the road that a person might be on right now. Then we can compare that to, well, what does it look like if we do some Roth conversions? And what if we do them gradually? And what if you're going into your own pocket to cover those conversion costs? But then we may look at little-known strategies to get money out of the retirement plan and get the taxes covered using what I call OPM, or other people's money. So the idea is to say, well, does it make sense to get taxes out of an IRA if I could borrow the money to cover the taxes at an attractive interest rate? Does it make sense to position monies in a program where we can grow money free from current taxes but also pull out a tax-free income when we're ready to enjoy a tax-free income? And this involves a little bit thinking outside the box. This is where we might look at how to properly design an index life plan to perform in a superior fashion.
You are called a tax-free living strategist because you create these systems that take a look at the current situation, predict to the best possible available information the future, and make a strategy for the optimization of everybody's income. And part of that optimization is saving taxes. So what you've explained to us is there is a Roth, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, and then there are other, perhaps, as you say, out-of-the-box strategies that do not involve a Roth. Now, with a Roth, explain how people can convert, but they do have to pay the tax.
Well, tax-free is the ideal, and this is what we're striving for our clients. And you know what, Adrian? I wish we lived in the world where we could get 6 or 7% yields on municipal bonds. Life would be easier. But we have to deal with the world the way it is, not the way we wish it was. I can remember my grandmother having a conversation with my mother years ago where she said, what should I do? There's one CD that'll pay me 14% interest rate, and then there's a CD from another bank that'll pay me 13.875, but they'll give me a toaster, or they'll give me an electric blanket or a blender. Which one should I choose?
Those are the days.
Yeah, and planning was simpler in those days. So now what we have to do is we have to look at, okay, we've all heard of a Roth IRA, and most people know, well, gee, if I have money in a Roth IRA, and the Roth IRA, I've had a Roth IRA in existence for 5 years, then any distributions I take out of that Roth IRA is not going to be subject to income taxes. But we can't just wave a magic wand. If somebody walks in with a significant traditional IRA or 401k or 403b, and let's say that's worth $400,000 or $500,000, we can't just say, oh, well, let's just switch that over to a tax-free Roth, because there's a toll to pay, and that toll is what's known as the conversion tax, which is ordinary income tax on the amount that's being converted. So let's say you go and convert this $500,000 traditional IRA or 401k to Roth all at once. You could trigger federal income taxes at a 39.6% rate, depending on what state you live in. You might trigger state income taxes at, say, an 8% rate. Also, if income's over $250,000, now you're going to trigger a 3.8% health care surtax. So over 50% of that 401k or traditional IRA is going to be wiped out in one fell swoop with taxes if someone gets overly aggressive in trying to convert all at once. So sometimes it may make sense to look at gradual conversions, or sometimes it makes sense to look at alternative tax-free planning. And this is where it makes sense to think outside the box and not think that municipal bonds are the only tax-free option, or that Roth IRAs are the only tax-free option. I would say in my personal view, it's very few financial advisors know how to correctly design an index life plan for somebody entering retirement to be able to draw tax-free distributions from that plan.
So let's focus on that for a moment. I mean, we've all heard of tax-free exchanges. This is something that's prominent when we deal with real estate. But how can we take some of our tax-deferred dollars and convert it not through a Roth, but some other of your solutions and systems?
Well, I'll give you an example. I had somebody come into the office recently. They had an old traditional life insurance policy, permanent life insurance policy. It was paying a low interest rate. I think it was 3 or 3.5%. The costs of the death benefit were based on old mortality tables, so they were paying way too much for the insurance component. And they didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know that they had the option to do a tax-free exchange to a life product called Index Life that allows the cash value to be indexed to market indexes such as the S&P 500, which gives them the potential to earn a much higher rate of interest. People also, when they think life insurance, they incorrectly think expense. We're kind of brainwashed to think that, well, when you're young, you get the least expensive term insurance you can find, and as soon as your mortgage is paid off and your kid's education is funded, get rid of it, because what do you need that expense for anymore? But our point of view is that if there's provisions in the tax code that are uniquely favorable towards insurance, we want to look at how to legally, morally, ethically take advantage of those tax code provisions to design an indexed life plan where maybe we're not seeking to maximize the death benefit. Maybe we're seeking to minimize the death benefit, minimize the costs, and optimize the ability of the plan to grow cash using indexes free from not just current taxes, but through the device of the tax-free policy loan, pull cash out of the policy tax-free. And this is where people don't know what they don't know.
I want to dwell on that as we wrap up here, because what we're talking about is on an override and an overall point of view from the 360 point view. Concentrate on your taxes. They're not going to be made easier by deferral. Deferral comes back to bite you at some point in life. At Ronald Gilak and Associates, we try to figure out for you, they try to figure out for you what time in life that might be so that you're prepared for it. Roth is one solution. There are other solutions. But once the conversions have been made, or once somebody has done their distributions and paid the tax, the idea of the borrowing feature that you've been talking about is something that I think gets lost on a lot of people, because it's that allows people to continue their tax-free lifestyle. Once the qualified dollars are out of their portfolios and they are working with after-tax dollars, this is what helps them keep it that way and keep it tax-free. So let's, before we close, just dwell on that one feature, which is one of those things people really don't know they don't know.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind, this is a strategy that can not only work for money that might be trapped in a tax-infested account like a qualified plan or 401k, but can be even be deployed for dollars that are just sitting in a money market account or sitting outside of a retirement account already that could be positioned in a more tax-advantaged way. And so if you think about something, in our society, anything that's characterized as loan proceeds is not taxable as income. I mean, if you walk into the bank and you borrow money, and they give you a check, that's loan proceeds. That's not taxable income. So if you have a properly structured tax-advantaged index life plan and you borrow from the insurance company, you're reducing your death benefit by the amount that's borrowed, but that is a tax-free source of revenue to you. Why? Because it's characterized as loan proceeds. There's even, as strange as this may sound, there's even a way to actually earn money on money that you borrowed from the insurance company using what's called a variable loan rate, where you're credited interest on funds that you borrowed minus a debit or interest charge for the loan proceeds. I don't necessarily want to get into detail on that in this webinar, but it's back to the whole idea of, well, gee, what if we could design a program where we have upside linked to equity indexes, and we've got the ability to not just grow tax deferred, but we've got the ability to grow free from current tax and access our money tax-free.
So as a practical matter, if I were retired and I was withdrawing $20,000 for a home improvement or even the trip of a lifetime, I might withdraw, have no penalty because I'm over 59 and a half, but I'd pay taxes on that. Whereas if I had a nest egg in the kind of solution system that you're talking about, I might borrow that $20,000 from myself. Once I did that, I would not have to be paying any taxes because it is borrowing, even though I am borrowing from myself and I have some impact on the death benefit in that policy. Nevertheless, if I'm willing to take that as opposed to paying taxes on my $20,000, I have a tax-free lifestyle that I could draw upon over and over again depending on my plan. So these are the kinds of things that people really don't know they don't know, Ron. And I just welcome everybody to go back to ronaldgielak.com, listen to our prior webinars, and of course we look forward to the next webinar. We're going to be talking about that deal with the devil that Ronald mentioned. And thank you so much for being with us.